Richard Boyd Barrett.
Taoiseach, there is literally not a day goes by when we don't get further evidence of the obscene profiteering of energy companies. The latest, of course, is Electric Ireland finding itself able to reduce prices for business, but not able to do it, it seems, for householders, and of course the fact that wholesale prices for energy have now dropped to 18-month lows, pre-war lows, but it appears while they were able to jack up prices to extortionate levels to crucify ordinary people, they can't reduce the prices now that wholesale prices have gone down. Isn't it long past time that you accepted that the profiteering can only be ended by introducing controls on prices and indeed by nationalising the energy sector so it operates on a not-for-profit basis and stops ripping off ordinary people who are being crushed by the cost of living crisis?
Thanks, Gerlach, and just want to thank deputies for their questions. In relation to the windfall tax and energy prices, the windfall tax proposal, which is at an advanced stage being developed by Minister Ryan and Minister McGrath, derives from EU law in this area. My understanding is that it has two elements. The first is a tax on oil and gas producers, or rather gas and oil product producers in Ireland, of which there aren't many, but there are a few, and then also a tax on generators. And the tax raised on generators will be used to bring down prices for businesses and for householders. It will apply to profits made in 2022 to be taxed in 23, and profits made in 2023 to be taxed in 2024. Generally, profit taxes are taxed the year after they're made, and that's the principle that will be applied as I understand it. I don't think that nationalising the energy sector is a good idea. At the outset, it would involve paying a large amount of compensation to the shareholders and owners of those companies. So people might argue that you'll recover that after 10 or 15 or 20 years, but certainly initially it would involve a very significant financial outlay, a big cost to the taxpayer, which wouldn't be recouped for a long time, if at all. I'm not sure if countries have ever tried to experiment with running energy systems on a not-for-profit basis. I think it was attempted in communist countries between the 1920s and the 1980s, and what they suffered with as a result was a lack of investment, shortages, blackouts, all of those things, and I'm not sure it's a model that we'd like to experiment with here, given it didn't work No, ESB always worked. ESB works as a state-owned enterprise and has a profit remit. I think what we're talking about is a model that would have been tried in the Soviet Union and places like that where it didn't work out so well. In relation to Deputy Haughey's question, like him, I don't support removing unanimity when it comes to sanctions. Unfortunately, there is evidence of circumvention, not particularly by EU countries to the best of our knowledge, but by some countries that are geographically located around the EU, you might say. And we see that there are unusual changes in trade flows and trade statistics that would indicate that circumvention may be occurring. And I suppose that does remind us that Russia does have some friends out there, notwithstanding what it's done. And there are some countries that have no choice to be Russia's friend for various reasons. So this is a serious situation. And also welcome the appointment of David O'Sullivan as the special envoy for sanctions. Deputy Durkan asked about the really terrible earthquake that happened in Turkey and Syria and the appalling human consequences of that. On behalf of the government, I wrote to President Erdogan to express my most sincere condolences for the loss of life and destruction that occurred as a consequence of the earthquakes. Our thoughts are with all of those who have been affected by the earthquakes and their aftershocks. We're providing 10 million in humanitarian assistance to the people of Turkey and also to northwest Syria. It's being done through the UN's humanitarian fund for Syria, also the Red Cross and Red Crescent societies, and to Irish non-governmental organisations, including Concern and Goal, working on the ground. And I want to take this opportunity to extend my condolences to Goal and to the families and the friends of all the Goal workers who lost their lives in the earthquake. The situation in Syria is of particular concern given the civil war there. and Ireland and the international community are going to work through the United Nations to ensure a speedy provision of aid to the parts of Syria that need it most. Deputy Donnelly asked about state aid. I just want to say I agree with what he said in relation to skills and the need to make sure that we have a pipeline of people who have the skills to work in the renewable energy sector and to help us to build those wind farms, to deploy all those solar panels. Let's not forget, though, they're often the same people who are asking to build all the houses and retrofit the houses and build a metro, and there's only so many people that can do so many things, and that's a challenge that we face, trying to do so much at the same time. In relation to state aid, though, I support, as the government does, the appropriate use of state aid, but we should never forget that state aid is ultimately taxpayers' money given to businesses, and small countries like ours will never be able to compete with big countries when it comes to the amount of state aid that they could give their companies, and that's why we always need to be careful about that. If the state aid rules are relaxed too significantly by the European Union, the amount of state aid that France or Germany or Italy can afford to give its companies will dwarf what we can do many times over, and we'll actually find ourselves at a competitive disadvantage. We'll be giving our companies state aid just so they can catch up, not actually compete and grow, and that's a big problem, and that always has to be borne in mind. Just when it comes to the war in Ukraine, I think Deputy Barry referred to the arms industry, and let's be under no illusions here that the war in Ukraine is a windfall, an absolute windfall for the arms industry, which will make a fortune out of the fact that there's a war happening in Europe. And that's not just the arms industry in the West, it's the arms industry all over the world. But we live in a dangerous world, and countries like Ukraine get attacked, and other countries face hybrid attacks, and that's why countries have to be able to defend themselves and have to be able to buy the equipment to do so. He referred to an event in the UAE. I'm not aware of that event, so to the best of my knowledge, there was no government involvement in that, but I could be wrong about that. But what I would say is that there is a defence and security industry in Ireland, and it is an industry that has a role to play. It's often involved in the space industry, in protective armour, in robotics, in artificial intelligence and things like cybersecurity. And unfortunately, we live in a dangerous world where even peaceful countries like Ireland that do not want to spend a fortune on defence have to spend money on defence because we could be attacked. Perhaps not in the way Ukraine is being attacked. I highly doubt that would ever happen. But hybrid warfare is a reality now, particularly when it comes to cybersecurity.